What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the podcast, episode 162. Today, we've got an awesome guest on the podcast. So glad you're here because we're going to be learning from a friend of the show, Creative Rise Mastermind grad, explorer, alpinist, creative,
to be honest,
photographer, filmmaker.
When he said alpinist, it took me a second to connect what that actually was. And if you're someone who's like me, you're like, what is that? I think it's a mountaineer.
It's like a mountaineer.
It's like an alpine mountaineer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I think
Lukas
so.
Mann.
Check with him.
Lukas Mann is on the show today, and he dropped out of college about a year and a half ago, has gone through quite the process of discovering how to run his own creative business, and his findings are fascinating. He's a really good communicator. The conversation is just really rich. It's a long conversation, but it gets better and better and better as the time goes on, hence why it was long. So make sure you listen to the entire thing. Great dude. Great guy.
Yeah.
Phenomenal conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun. Also, you guys, we've got something very, very exciting coming the day after Valentine's Day, February 15th. We are hosting a totally free community workshop that is going to be live and virtual, and we are doing it on Sell Like a Six-Figure Creator, which we are so pumped about because honestly, sales was something that I feel like I hated at the very beginning of my career, and now it's actually one of my favorite things about owning a creative business because when you figure out how to sell in a way that feels authentic and effective and strategic and natural, it all of a sudden becomes so much more fun.
Yeah.
So we are teaching not only how to sell, but also how to create a six-figure offer along with a bunch of tips and just not even tricks, but tips and strategy around sales.
You got to know, like, sales is always going to be hard if you're selling the wrong thing. So we're going to first teach you how to sell the right thing. Then we're going to teach you the 5 sales strategies that actually make selling easy, natural, comfortable, successful, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And you can apply this to your social media, to sales calls, to in-person meetings, all that stuff.
Oh.
It's going to be so good. And then
Tell them what we're doing. That's going to be so
we're actually going to do a sales call demo. So we have done this a few times on different live workshop stuff. Typically, it's been inside of the Creative Rise Mastermind. I don't know if I've ever done a live sales call demo with somebody who wasn't in the mastermind, but basically what that means is I invite somebody up to be a panelist on these live workshops we do, and they pitch me, they sell me literally live in front of everybody, hundreds of people, their service. And then I flip around and I sell it back to them with the very limited knowledge I have on their business and the context. And then we look at both examples of the sales process and go, what can we take from each of those? And how do we basically move forward with a better plan of attack for sales next time? So you learn a ton.
Yeah.
You get a laugh. It's a lot of fun. So yeah.
It's awesome. So again, it's totally free to register. All you have to do is go to creativerise.com/sales. You can register for free. And guess what? There's actually a giveaway, and we do this every single time we run one of these live workshops. There's a $100 cash giveaway for anybody who registers, screenshots their registration page, posts on their Instagram story, and tags us at Creative Rise. You got to tag us at Creative Rise, else we don't know that you posted it. But screenshot your registration page, throw it on your Instagram story, talk about what you're excited about, and we are going to give one lucky random winner on the actual workshop $100 cash to get you started on your 6-figure journey.
100%. So
you
we're
guys
excited.
Gonna be a ton of fun. We're so excited, but we're also really excited for you to listen to this episode because Lukas drops so many bombs. You're going to love it. So here's Lukas.
Here's Lukas. Lukas, man, welcome to the podcast, brother. So glad you're here. Thanks for being on. Excited.
Hey, stoked to be here anytime.
Let's go.
And if you are watching via video, we were just talking about this. No, we are not interviewing an axe murderer. We are interviewing an outdoorsman. Behind Lukas is like 4 different ice picks axe things. So just wanted to give that
We are interviewing someone
context
who
clue for
has got to
anybody
make
who's
his ice axes look pretty because he's actually not using them as much as he wish he was right now because the season has not been very good.
Yes.
That's who we're interviewing today.
Yeah, what are those axes for, Lukas? What a little personal before we hop into the business, but what are those axes for?
Yeah, great question. So I kind of got into the mountains hiking like most people did, but pretty quickly progressed into what I would say, I would characterize as mountaineering / alpinism in a beginner sense. I'm not an advanced alpinist by any means, but I really enjoy the mountains. And so as I've gotten better, I've kind of added to the collection of axes that you see on the wall. So there's a glacier axe on there. There's a bit more of a technical axe, and then there's 2 pretty dedicated ice tools that are for ice climbing.
So cool.
So
That
bad.
I wish on your behalf that you were just getting to use more, because I know that we were just talking about this before we actually hit record. We love skiing. This guy loves mountains, everything in general,
Winter
and it's
is
it's
the
been a little bit
best.
rough of a winter
Yeah.
for everybody.
All the
So
winter people are
pray for
mourning.
snow if you're listening to the podcast. But dude,
Yes.
glad you were on. I mean, you know the show, you know it well. You know that we're here to talk about creative business, what has helped you build a business to this point, and you've got a really cool story of that. I mean, just the nature of your story as a human, and like where you've lived and what you've been into, all that stuff is really, really fascinating. But start with rapid fire, as we always do on the show. Quick question: where are you from?
This is a tough question for me.
I want the full answer so people can get some context.
I was born in Ontario, but
Hey.
I quickly,
Where in
quickly
Ontario,
moved out.
actually?
I was born in Ottawa.
Okay, in Ottawa, okay.
My mom's family is still based in Ottawa, and quickly moved to Halifax, and was there quickly. And then I spent a good chunk of my childhood in Prince Edward Island, so complete opposite side of the country to where I am now. Small
Hey.
little island, a lot of potatoes. And then when I was 10 or 11, I can't remember, my family moved to Indonesia. So my dad moved for his job, and we all followed in tow. I've got 5 siblings, so all of us up and moved to Indonesia, and I was there for 7 years. And then I came back to Canada. I was in Toronto for a bit, and then I was in Alberta for a bit, and now I'm in BC. So home is a very fluid concept. I feel very home right now in BC, but also Indonesia feels very much like home. PEI, Ottawa actually still does too. I have a lot of family there, so I'm kind of a
Crazy.
bit of a mess from a
I love
location.
that though.
You're spread out.
Okay,
I
what's
love
your
it, man.
favorite Indonesian food? Favorite thing you like to
Oh.
eat when you're back home in Indonesia?
So Indonesian food is actually a very fragmented mix of stuff because it's all islands, right? And so they've all actually got very distinct foods. There's not really one Indonesian cuisine per se.
Mhm.
But I don't know, chicken satay is pretty awesome. Satay ayam they call it, or just a good nasi goreng would be kind of up my alley right now. I miss it.
Bro.
Is
So
that similar
good.
to what you loved when you?
Yeah, mie goreng, nasi
goreng.
goreng, yeah, all that stuff, dude. There's nothing better than being in Indo and just like
all the
coming
goreng.
off a good surf, rocking up to a little street food vendor. I don't know. When I was there last time, it was like 80 cents to $1 US for like just a little
So-
plate of really good street food. And I've got like a bulletproof stomach. Like when I travel, I never get sick. I'm one of those lucky people. So I would just eat all the street food. All the street food's so good. So
Lucas, if you were in our house right now and you walked to our pantry, there's about 50 packets of freeze-dried mie goreng packets.
no, it's like the
Oh,
you know that
it's
like
like
you
the,
know that
like-
like
Indomie?
yeah, Indomie, yeah.
There's
There
about
we go.
there's a million of them
He
in our
knows,
pantry
he knows.
right now.
I love it. Okay, moving on because we
Rapid
can talk
is
about
never
we can
rapid.
talk about Indonesia
It's
all
never
day.
rapid.
But you're from everywhere. You would
Yes.
really enjoy some nasi goreng. Now, what is your business? If you met somebody in the airport flying home from Indonesia, or in the mountains, you know, in Vancouver, above Vancouver,
Say, "What do you
are
do?"
you? And they say, "What do you do?" What do you tell them you do?
Yeah, great question. I feel like depending on the day, sometimes it changes. Like I was like, sometimes I'm in this kind of mood or this kind of mood. But essentially, I work with a camera. I love to be outdoors, but I also work in commercial media / marketing as well. So everything's freelance, and I would say about 40% of my work is in the construction, blue collar industry in the Fraser Valley here in BC, and then the rest of my work is all in the outdoor world.
Love
Love
it.
it.
And then how long have you been doing that for?
Full time for really just about a year and a bit, but I've been kind of slowly transitioning into that for a lot longer, if that makes sense.
Love it. And then
Yeah.
last question of rapid fire before we get into the rest of the questions for the episode. What's a flop that you've had in your business? Whether it's something that you tried to do and it just didn't work, or let's say you're on a shoot and you lost a lens in the snow, down the ice, like it slid into a waterfall. Like what's an embarrassing moment or a flop you've had in your business for just to humanize you in case anyone's looking at Lucas and going, he's got axes on the wall, he's perfect, his business is perfect. Let's humanize you for a second. What is a flop you've had in your business?
Oh,
It's a tough question.
From a business perspective, I'm finding it hard to think of something, but I do remember actually from I guess more of a media perspective, I dropped a 360 camera like completely off the summit ridge of a mountain once, which was really sad. It was just like
That would have
it's
been
just
the sickest
classic
footage.
Oh, I know, they're so fun, and it was like, oh, there it goes. Like, bum, 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 bum,
Wait, were
a
you
couple
just
thousand.
holding it in your hand?
No, I mean, I had it on the stick, but I
Yeah.
dropped the stick.
Oh, you dropped the
Oh
stick.
no.
It all went.
So
Yeah,
it was
pretty bad.
never recovered.
What made you drop the
Mm.
stick?
Wow.
I honestly can't remember. I think I like, well, okay, it was a pretty technical summit ridge, and so I was kind of paying more attention to not dying than I was to the camera, which
Probably a good idea.
probably was. I don't regret, but it was the kind of like, it was irretrievable, gone forever. And you know, given the stakes, I was happier it was the camera and not
Yeah.
me. So
Then your body.
it wasn't.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a sad moment for sure.
Okay, so good. Okay, so
awesome.
Lucas, you would be defined from the outside looking in. So you said what you said about what you do. You know, I'm a camera person who likes to be outside. I'm a mixed media marketing professional, basically doing it freelance. Those are your words. From the outside, it looks like, I think a lot of people would say in their words, well, you look like a social media influencer. You've got a massive following. What's your following at on IG?
Sitting around 150,000.
Yeah. So epic following on Instagram. You also have
I
gotten
want
to
to just
work.
add that you've grown in the last 5 years, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like
It's new.
Yeah.
this is not like, oh, you had 150
Back in 2016.
15 or 15
Yeah.
years ago. This is like within the last like year it's been cranking. So I just want to like give a little context.
It's about
to that.
no, great point. I would say growth, like real growth, started only about a year and a half ago.
Yeah,
So
which
that's
is incredible.
crazy.
That's cool. And
crazy.
we're going to talk about that on
Yeah.
today's show. So social media got a big following. You also, you know, have gotten to work some really, really cool brands. And then you're also saying you work in the construction industry a little bit. So what's so cool about this is there's obviously some multi-facet to this. Break down, just for the sake of the podcast, I want you to brag for a little bit on what you've accomplished. And I know you're a super humble dude. I know this feels a little bit odd to do, but we're asking you to do it because what you've accomplished is really cool. The timeline you've done it in is really cool. And I think the way you've done it is cool, which is why we have you on the podcast today. And I want you to talk about where you're at and some of the things you've accomplished to, one, inspire people so that they know it's possible for them too. Because 2 years ago, you know, I'm sure you listened to something, you saw something, or something inspired you to go after what you're currently living in today. And that's what this moment could do for somebody else who's listening to the show. And two, contextualizing things is everything. So we'd love to hear where you're at, and then we're going to break that down so people can actually understand what are some of the key things that you've done in your own business that has allowed you to get to where you're at. Give us something.
Totally. Yeah. So I mean, okay, I'll say this. After I dropped out of university, which we can get into a little bit later, about just over a year ago, and within a month or 2 months, I jumped into, I think it was cohort 9 of Creative Rise.
Yeah, the mastermind,
if I'm-
Creative Rise Mastermind, round
Yeah,
9. Yeah, round
right.
9, baby.
Yeah, so that was great, and I think that definitely set the stage for a lot of. It was just good. It was real people, and both from the community perspective and from you, because I think, like, to be honest with you, there's like, you can find content that can teach you anything anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
Of course.
It's hard to pull it together, but you can piece together some sort of a creative education online, and it can be somewhat meaningful.
100%.
But I think what you
Absolutely.
guys do that's so good is you bring such a personal component to it. And sorry, it sounds like I'm being paid to say this. You bring such a personal component into it that I think, I mean, obviously the stuff that was coming out of your mouths was super valuable, but it was also just the relationship with you guys and getting to hear about your story, and then getting to meet all these other people that are trying to do the same thing. That was really, I would describe that as very formational for kind of my trajectory at that point.
Sweet.
So yeah, by all means, shameless plug. They're not paying me. Go do it. It's worth it. But,
Well, we appreciate that. Okay, so keep going. So where are you at?
Yeah.
Where did that take you?
Yeah, so I mean, at that point, I really didn't have much of anything. I had a little bit of smattering of the occasional freelance work that came in, but I think that really set a tone for me moving forward. That I think the bread and butter of what I wanted to do had to come primarily from retainer work. It didn't mean that 100% of my revenue had to come from retainer work. It could have, it could be 25, 30, but there had to be some sort of a base that I could count on to be able to, in some senses, just live, right? And also to be able to project financially and figure out what was going to work moving forward. So it became my focus very quickly, trying to land more and more retainer work. And so the very quick and easy, I don't want to say easy, but the very quick thing that came to my mind was the construction kind of blue collar industries here in the Fraser Valley. There's Vancouver's a very rapidly growing city, and there's a lot of there's all sorts of work being done, and there's all sorts of people that have a real need for good high quality marketing,
Yeah.
particularly on social media, but also from a video. If you're putting stuff on paid or you're doing websites too. So that kind of was a very quick like, okay, I'm gonna hop on this and try to just nail down a couple clients so that I can move forward and start to really expand and grow off that. So that's kind of the perspective that I took, and that took a good while. It wasn't immediate, but now a year later, I'm at a point where every month I've got between $4,000 or $5,000 of consistent retainer work coming in, and that's kind of increasing every couple months as that goes along.
Yeah.
And then everything on top of that, for the most part, is freelance creative work within the outdoor industry. So some of that is social media work, some of that is more commercial stuff that doesn't have to do with my social media and is just purely from a creative standpoint. So creating work for brands and businesses in the outdoor space. So and that I would say I think that a lot of my approach as far as learning how to sell and pitch and position myself also came from learning from what you guys had to say in Creative Rise, because I think I had a bit of a mental thing beforehand where I was like, I want to be in the outdoors because it's true. I love the outdoors and I love being, there's nothing that makes me happier than being out in the mountains with a camera in my hand shooting stuff. Like that's I know it's where I want to be. But I also realized, I've got skills that are so easy to utilize and actually genuinely help people out and make people's lives better.
Yeah.
I've found that very easily in the construction world. So I kind of came to a point where I was actually a lot more, I wouldn't even use the word okay. I was actually really excited to be able to blend and mix and match kind of the two worlds, because I actually have found I've learned a ton from the construction world that I wouldn't have known. And I've made some really wonderful connections, and I've kind of put my name in some circles that I wouldn't have otherwise if I hadn't have pursued that. And it still gives me the time and the leeway to pursue a lot of really cool projects in the outdoor world. So that's kind of where I'm at. That's kind of a general, like, I've gone from having basically nothing to having I would say a consistent, steady monthly income that covers all my expenses and allows me to kind of reinvest into the stuff I'm doing in the outdoor world, if that makes sense.
Totally. So
Absolutely.
You said 5-ish K in retainers from this construction industry. And then that's growing, which is epic and so cool it's growing. And then on top of that, all the other outdoor brand work you do is just cherry on top, because your basic needs are met basically with the retainers you got, which is so cool. We talk about that model on the podcast. We definitely talked about that in the mastermind. I remember us having even just a one-on-one conversation about that. Like, hey, what does it actually look like if you can cover a lot of your necessities, with these retainers that aren't in the industry that you actually want to be working in, but they're in high leverage industries, meaning your skills are very valuable in the industry. It doesn't take a lot of time, but the industries make a ton of money. There's a lot of money running through that industry's economy. Therefore, you can get a decent pay cut from it, right? And then you use that money to fund the lifestyle to go pursue more work you want to get, which is for you getting into the mountains even more and locking down some really cool deals. So you've had some cool deals also in the mountains. We're talking about construction here, but you've had some really cool stuff in the mountains.
Yeah.
For the last little section of Lucas bragging to yourself for a second, talk to me about what a couple clients you've got to work with in the outdoor space, and then what's been like your biggest deal. Break it down a little bit. Yeah,
great question. So I've done, I can just rattle off a couple names. So I did a bit of work on the social side of Scarpa, which is a pretty high-end
Italian, baby.
It's exactly Italian kind of mountain footwear brand. I did a bunch of work with Through Dark, which I'm wearing their stuff right now. Repping Through Dark, I wear it everywhere. They do great stuff. They're a British outerwear brand founded by a bunch of ex-Special Forces guys. They're really cool.
That's sweet.
I love what they're doing. I do a lot of work for Mount Seymour, which is a local one of the local Vancouver ski hills. I did some stuff with Insta360, and then there's kind of a smattering of other brands that I don't know. Let me see if I can look at It's been a while since I've even looked through this stuff.
Too
Brush
many
up
to
on
Oh, I
remember
can
off the
see it.
top of your brain. That's actually a good
Yeah,
problem.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And then just like some stuff kind of comes up everywhere. Like I've done stuff with. Oh, there's a brand called Vallon. They do kind of mountaineering ski eyewear stuff.
Cool.
Amazing.
Bareface is a really cool whiskey brand that I've actually gotten to work with. Their
Sweet.
whiskey is not so much my industry per se, but they're this new kind of startup Canadian whiskey brand that's doing some really cool things in the whiskey space, and
Sweet.
their whole brand kind of revolves around the Canadian wilderness. So that was really fun as well.
That was aligned. Yeah. Cool.
That's
And
so
then,
cool.
I mean, you just dropped a project with Intel. I'm going to say the name because you posted about it. Really cool.
Mhm.
That was, I believe, your biggest gig you've had, correct?
Totally. Yeah.
Cool. And that's a massive company, like huge company. So for everyone who knows who you are already, or for people who do not know who you are, and they're gonna go look, Lucas up online after this, you're gonna see that Intel project. It's beautiful, like phenomenal job on it, by the way. Break down what that project looked like a little bit, and then what were some of the things you delivered on, because I think a lot of people have a lot of curiosity around what do big brands actually hire creators to do? And I thought it was a really unique campaign. So what did that project look like? Just for someone who's really curious, who's going, okay, I saw Lucas post about it. Was there more to the project we didn't see on your feed? Like break that down.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. Great question. It was, as far as my experience, it was a relatively unorthodox contract, at least from what I've experienced and heard, which made it really fun. So I was approached by so to preface that, most of these, I mean, you guys know, but most of these bigger brand projects come by way of agencies. And so I was approached by an agency. I think they're based out of Toronto. And they approached me and said, hey, we've got this project with Intel coming up. We want you and two other creatives, both of whom are based in Toronto, to collaborate on this project. And so I said, yes, whatever, no problem, sent over some rates and kind of kept moving forward. And then it actually, it kind of, the nature of the project changed as time went on. It eventually ended up becoming the meat of it was a 3-minute commercial spot for their YouTube and paid ads. They put a ton of paid behind it on YouTube, and then they took segments of it and then used it for TV ads and whatnot. And so then my job, I kind of took on a bit of a creative director role within the project, which wasn't initially proposed from the start, but there were the three of us, and it's a little bit hard to have three people trying to set up I don't know. It just
For
didn't make
sure.
sense. So I basically took on a bit more of a creative director role and kind of gave the guy, I found a videographer in Toronto, and gave him and those other two creatives a bunch of instruction to essentially go out and shoot stuff.
So
And then
cool.
on my end, I hired one of my friends, Mitchell, who's a phenomenal cinematographer based in Abbotsford, who you should all check out his work. Mitchell Cook, he's amazing, does incredible work. And so we shot our segment of that here in BC over the course of a couple of days around here. And so then in the end, then my job was, I was in front of the camera for that part. And then in the end, I put everything together. Mitch helped me a decent amount too. He's great at what he does, but I put everything together and then colored and edited and did all of the post-production stuff and then sent it off to Intel. So yeah, that's kind of how that deal came about. It always looks a little bit weird on social media because you don't see any of that. And then, sorry, I will say too, the part of it on my social, then I also had a clause in the contract where I was paid for social exposure essentially. So I posted a vertical cut down, like a 60-second cut down of my part to my Instagram, and then the other guys did the same thing. So that was kind of all in all of our individual contracts. If that makes sense.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Okay, so we've talked, and you're doing a lot of stuff that would be considered like influencing, right? Like that exposure on socials, that content creation that's specifically for your feed. And then you're also doing brand work that's like the more like traditional, it's not going on your feed, but it's just content for them to be able to use for their own platforms. If someone's wanting to get into the content creation side, almost that like influencer side, maybe they've only been shooting for brands in the more traditional sense, and they're wanting to grow into that. And let's say they're building a following, all of that kind of stuff. What do you like to offer brands? When a brand is coming to you saying, hey, we want to work with you, can you send us over some rates or whatever it is? You don't have to give her your rates, but you can talk about maybe what do you offer them? Like, is it like, oh, just one post in your feed? Is it stories and posts? And then how do you gather that for somebody, maybe for someone who's listening that's
Exactly.
like, okay, I know how to pitch maybe just like my services to a brand, but when it comes to the influencing side, I have no idea. What does that look like?
Yeah. So I mean, often they'll come with kind of a preconceived notion of what they want, or at least what sort of a budget they have, and
Uh,
then they'll try to figure out what you can do for them at that point. So yeah, I have rates that are not always set in stone, depending on the brand and depending on the gig and what they want.
Yep.
I think a lot of it also comes down to how not only because there's obviously a certain amount of what I would charge for, let's say a reel on my feed that would be purely for the exposure part of it that, takes into account the years and the, countless hours of growing an audience. But it also takes into account just the sheer difficulty of shooting stuff sometimes. I
mm,
mean, and that
Absolutely.
varies, right? Like I've had brands say only iPhone stuff. We only we don't want anything, no color, just we want it super raw UGC style. And I'm like, oh, okay, sure, sounds great. And in my mind, I'm already thinking, I can get away with charging a bit less for that because it's not going to take as much of my time and
Yes.
energy to devote to.
yeah.
It's not to say it's not valuable. It's still very valuable, but it's
Course.
just as far as a time component from my side. And then there are brands for whom I'm shooting we're out in the mountains shooting relatively high production value stuff. And I've got 2 or 3 guys out with me and we're shooting projects in that capacity. And that's when I start to take that side of the cost a lot more seriously because it's just tough. And I mean, the nature of anyone who's shot stuff in the mountains knows that the nature of shooting things in the mountains is very difficult. And so
Yeah.
I also want to make sure that that's worth it from that perspective. So I don't know. I guess to answer your question succinctly, I think it's extremely variable. It
Yeah.
totally depends on the scope of what brands want. But I think really being unwilling to compromise on certain things has saved me a lot because often I'll just say this is my rate. Because I know if I were to say okay, I can do it for a bit less than that, then I'm going to go into that and I'm not going to feel like I really want to go out there and
Mm,
create really good work. And
yep.
so
Yeah.
in my mind, the best way that I have come up with thinking about keeping my rates where they're at is that it affords me the luxury of being able to throw as much time and energy into something as possible, thereby in the long run creating better work anyway. And
Yeah.
so
Absolutely.
I think really it is just an investment,
Mm,
by a
Yeah.
brand on their half and on their behalf. And if they don't want to do it, that's totally fine, right? Like it's
mm,
Yep.
not my services aren't going to be for everyone, but when they are, I think being really upfront and straightforward about what's included in that cost, both from an exposure standpoint and from a quote unquote content creation standpoint, is definitely key.
mm.
It's awesome.
So I hear you saying you're like, I almost have a base on what it costs me to put something on my feed based on the energy, time, countless hours that I've put in to grow an audience. And then on top of that, I assess every project by going, okay, if that is base, what am I adding on top due to what time's involved? What's the commitment? What's the risk level? I mean, you're doing a bunch of stuff that involves some actual bodily risk, right? Like do I have to bring other people into the job? So sounds like you come up with a good base, and I'm sure that base grows as your audience grows. And then
Yeah.
and as well as you get in demand. But outside of that, you're then taking context, and it's a little bit subjective, but you're taking context of what the job's going to have, and then you're building that on top. Does that sound right?
Yeah, 100%.
Cool.
I think
I
that's a
love
great
it.
way,
I love
to
it.
characterize it.
Okay, so why'd you drop out of college to pursue being a full-time
Yes.
creator? Tell me about
It's
that.
my favorite
Yeah, I would
question.
love to talk about that. Yeah, so I did exactly a year and a half of university. I moved out to BC actually to go to school here. And I was in the international economics pathway. So very, very different to what I'm doing right now. And I would say, contrary to many stories of dropping out, it wasn't actually that I strongly disliked what I was in school for. I truthfully didn't mind it at all. I found it in some respects quite interesting. But I really just kind of did a baseline calculation of what it was going to cost me to go through 4 years, four and a half maybe years of university and private Christian university here in Canada, which is where I was at, and it was just super expensive, and I wasn't
Absolutely.
super comfortable with the amount of debt that was going to be required of me to achieve that degree. And it, that was really kind of the first realization that started to push me towards the idea of dropping out. And then I think, in all honesty, when I dropped out, I didn't have a ton of. Now, I don't know if this is necessarily advisable for everyone. I didn't have a ton of income. I had a bit, like there was some work that was
Mm-hmm.
coming in, but I wouldn't say it was enough to constitute a full-time income. It was maybe a decent part-time income.
Yeah.
But ideally, you want to be able to live on more than that, and you're paying for a car and gas and rent and groceries and everything, right? And
Yes.
so it was certainly a bit of a leap of faith, and the way I thought about it at the time, which is still the way I think about it, is you tend to do your best work when the rug is pulled out from underneath you, and you kind of have to sink or swim in that
The
sense.
fear.
And so I think about it, and I think one of the best ways you could think about it is like a form of productive stress, where there's this real stress being put on you. It wasn't like I was in danger of being out on the streets, but it certainly was a very real, okay, like this is real. I gotta make some money, figure something out. The other thing I will say that did that did matter too was I calculated the amount of money that I was in effect losing or spending on university every month, and then said, really, if I can make that much a month, I'm doing really well, because I'm essentially 2xing, like I
Yes.
was losing that, I'm making it. So to go from losing to, zero would be, pretty good. You're no longer
Right.
losing money and spending money. And then to go from that to actually making it, well, that'd be great. And, it kind of reframed it in this positive perspective where it's like, yeah, that might not be a super high income at all. It might not even be a full-time income, but it's certainly a lot further than I would have been if I'd stayed in school and kept
Going
losing
into the
money.
red. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that was just me, right? Like I don't think that's not necessarily the same mental calculations that everyone's going to make in that circumstance, but that was mine. That's kind of how I went about it. And
Yeah.
and then I came across the Creative Rise thing and was like, I think this is what I would this is something that I could see being really valuable, and that was another risk that I took, because I was like, it's
Totally.
a lot of
Yeah.
money, and I've got life expenses and stuff to pay for, but I was like, I think given that I'm willing to say goodbye to traditional education for now, I should be willing to invest in some sort of, let's say, non-traditional education moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's what that was, and I that was very much a resounding success in my mind looking back.
Yeah. Okay. So I just looked up. You said international or global economics, right? Was what you were in?
Yeah.
Okay. So I
Yeah.
just looked up the average entry level global economics salary. Have you
No,
looked
not
at
even
this?
entry, just the salary.
Have you looked that
No,
up?
I have
Like, do you
no clue.
know what you were expecting to make at the end of those 4 years?
No, and this is again one of those things where I think I was guilty of what a lot of people are guilty of, which is just going to university for the sake of going to university, and
Of
I
course.
did like it. Like I
Yeah.
would have probably ended up in some sort of political role eventually one day. No, I don't know, because I didn't think through it very well. You're catching me here.
Well,
Okay, so it says-
give you the
I'm looking at this. It says entry level positions for international economists in Canada start at around $79,000 per year, which is actually a really solid
good
starting
entry
wage.
level
That's a really solid
wage,
entry
for
level
sure.
wage. So knowing that now versus knowing what you know now, having the freedom you have now, making the money you have now that you know that number, how does that make you feel about the dropout?
It doesn't change my thought process
I hope
whatsoever.
that confirms your decision.
That's what I mean. Like I
Yeah,
look at
that's
that.
a good way to
That's
think
a
about it.
solid. That's actually a really solid entry level position. Yet at the same
Yeah.
time, I think about where you're at in your business in a year. I mean, how many more years of school would you have if you were still in school?
Okay, actually, you bring up a great point. I thought about this too. In my mind, I said, at the time I had at least 2.5, if not 3 more years of school. And I said in my mind, like, I'm actually not gonna, because initially I was like, if it doesn't work after 6 months, like, I'm going back to school. And I was like, well, that would be a little short-sighted, because, I'm in school for the next 2.5 years, so I may as well give
Right.
myself some lengthier period of time to actually see if this works. And
Yep.
in my mind, it was, precisely what you're saying, where if by the end of what would have been a 4-year degree, I am not making what would be comparable to a full-time income, then maybe it would be cause to reconsider. But yeah, knowing that what you're saying, those numbers, I think I definitely didn't make that much this past year, but I'm definitely on track to make that much this year.
Yeah,
if that makes
totally.
sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, oh, and I mean, you're still only a year and a bit into your career full time, which is incredible.
Yeah.
So to be making that much in
Yeah.
the first 12 months is incredible. I mean, that's a big
Yeah.
win. Okay, so I got two questions for you, and I want to play them off. They're going to be opposite. So the first one is, I want you to give some advice to the person who has an audience, maybe even like yours, yet they're not monetizing it well. They don't know how to make money, because that is a total reality, right? There are a lot of people
Yeah.
with thousands and thousands of followers,
Hundreds of
you know, 100,000 plus followers, but they don't make any money, or they're not making the amount of money they should. So as someone who's learning to and has monetized your audience in a cool way, or even looked for other opportunities where your audience validates the other opportunities, maybe even off social, that you can make money, what would your advice be for someone who's like, okay, I've got 70, 80, 90, 100,000 followers like yourself, yet I'm not really making any money with it because I don't know how. Lucas, tell me what to do. Like, what would your advice be for that person?
Yeah, great question. I think, well, there's a couple different components to my answer for that question. There's one sense in which there are a lot of people monetizing their audience in ways I haven't, in the form of creating things like courses, creating things like digital assets, selling
Yes.
things to their audience. I haven't done that. So I don't want to claim any sort of expertise in that area that I don't. Is that something that I look forward to and am actively working towards? For sure. But that's something that I still haven't leaned into yet. So I will say that. That being said, I do think by nature of having an audience, your audience is monetizable, because brands are actively paying millions and millions of dollars probably every day across the world for precisely that, an audience
yeah.
So there's not a question of whether audiences are monetizable. It's really just more so how you present it. And so a lot of it was just, to be honest with you, it was a combination of two things. Actually, no, it was the same thing in different ways. I really like, in fact, I've got it on a sticky note right here, the phrase relentless iteration. I think that's the key to be honest with you, a lot of things. But when it came to pitching, so the first brand deals that I ever did came through pitches. And that was just because I didn't have much of a brand portfolio. And I also at the time didn't have a super huge audience. And so that cold outreach was my best way of getting in touch with people. And so relentless iteration in that, in that facet of business or social media was huge, right? And putting in those reps and learning how to pitch, learning how to communicate oneself, learning how to identify the different potential problems a brand may have. I mean, because they're all over the place, right? That was huge. So learning to pitch and sell and communicate. And when I say sell, I don't mean like hopping on a call and being super salesy. I mean really learning how to understand the mind of the person across from you on a call or in person. And then through them being able to understand the broader problems that a brand may be facing. I mean, that's really the essence of selling something. And then apart from that, I would also say relentless iteration from a content perspective. Like I only learned how to create reasonably good content because I created a lot of crap stuff. And I think that's the case with, I was just listening to a great podcast yesterday on Picasso and Disney, and it was comparing the two of them, and they're wildly different people. Both of them, both of whom could be regarded as some of the best creatives the world has ever seen. And really their core competency was this sense of relentless iteration on their craft. They just created. I mean, Picasso, by the time he died, I think he had over 60,000 published pieces of work, which meant that the calculations were something like from the time that he was 18 till the day that he died, he created at least one piece of art every single day, which is crazy to think about. And then Disney, likewise. I mean, he was just a relentless machine when it came to iterating upon ideas and creating new stuff and creating new films and creating new ideas and writing new stories. And so I think for almost anything you could put your mind to, specifically in social media, whether it be pitching or creating content, or even cold outreach. Like I think really that willingness to buckle in and say, I'm going to get to work for the sake of getting to work here, and eventually the results will roll in.
Yeah.
That's the hope. But I'm actually going to fall in love with the work and really start to hone these skills. And I'm at a point now where to be honest with you, I don't, I could probably go the next 6 months and not have to pitch anything and still have a pretty decent income.
Yeah, of
But I
course.
actually but the point I say that is because I actually make a pretty concerted effort to continue to pitch, even if I might not even have the time to take on the stuff that could come in as a result of that, because I think it's one of those skills that will never not be valuable, right?
Oh,
Like
good
the
Yeah,
ability
call.
to
100%.
sit down on
Yeah.
calls with people, to communicate yourself well in text, over an email or over texts, to be able
Yeah.
to sit down in person with someone and just
Hmm.
like look them in the eyes and become the kind of person that someone is going to trust and want to work with. I mean, that's an evergreen skill that is going to transfer over into anything you ever want to do. And so I
Mm.
Yeah.
actually do it not so much because I need to right now, but because I love it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. And something that I've even noticed, Lucas, that you do really well, that we have seen other people who are in your space also do this well, and they're rewarded for it. And then there's people who don't do this well, is that your content is gorgeous and beautiful and does not, you know, chintz on any quality, yet it also has a product aspect. The way that you display on your Instagram the photos you take, you're also like looking at this going, oh, that's also like a sick product shot of that tent or that backpack
You're
or
finding
that
good
jacket.
ways to, include product in
Yeah, it's
your
not
content.
just like giant landscapes, right? Because
Mhm.
we have a lot of like people that have amazing tactical camera experience and they have these incredible, beautiful photos, and they're like, why is no brands pitching me? Well, because you're not actually showcasing brands. They're not seeing themselves in your work.
Yeah.
And I think you've done a really good job of putting the idea in brands' minds of like, oh, I could see my backpack in that
Mm,
photo, right? So I think
totally.
even that in itself is so helpful. So all that, such good advice.
Okay, so here's the flip of this. And I want this in like a short. I wonder if we could, I mean, maybe you even just mentioned it. But here's the flip of this. Add anything you feel like you need to add. If you don't feel like you need to add anything, you just said it. That's great. But the opposite of this, someone who is good at their craft, knows how to monetize, but is frustrated because they know if they could build an audience, they could do it even better. They're making money with clients in brand work. They just don't have a big audience, but really wants to build one. A lot of people are like, socials are dead. It's super hard to build an audience. From someone who just built an audience to 150K in the last year and a half, what is your advice to that person? Because if you can have audience and you have monetization skills, it's obviously it's a jackpot in a lot of different ways, right? So for that person, obviously being like hardcore about committing, I love what you said, commit with no expectations, just commit for the sake of committing because you love the work. That's obviously a great piece of advice for this question as well. What else?
I think a lot of the shift, and something I'm still trying to actively figure out, and I think anyone who follows me will over the coming months start to see a bit of a shift in the stuff I'm putting out, is that I think especially in the outdoor world, now I'm speaking from my perspective in the outdoor world, but I think this is true of almost any, quote unquote world you want to live in on social media. I think there's a massive proliferation of beautiful, trendy, quick things that are going to catch your attention. There's not many people that are essentially purveyors of really good ideas. And I think that's something that is starting to change, and I'm starting to see it up close, where regardless of the industry, people are starting to crave, and this is why there are certain people on YouTube that are blowing up in these like long form styles of videos that aren't particularly cinematic or beautiful, but they're real people expressing real ideas. And I think that is where, if I can say so much as to the direction of social media, I think we are starting to crave. I mean, we freaking heard authenticity all over the place. I hate the word, but
Yeah.
I think really a better way to say it is, if you want to grow on social media, focus less so on the visuals and the trends and the audios and whatever, and focus more on becoming the kind of person that can identify good ideas and re-express them in ways that are going to be appealing to the kind of people that you want to reach. And that's something that I'm still in the process of learning how to do. So I'm giving you the same advice I'm giving myself. But I think I really do think that's the direction that things are heading. There was a time where just pure stunning visuals, even in the past like 2-3 years, like where the visuals could do it, and that was it, and like that would get you there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's changing.
Changing.
And I'm not to crap on that, because there are people that are amazing visual artists, but I think there's going to come a time relatively soon where the real growth in social media is going to be driven by people who are spreading ideas,
Value.
and in a
Yeah.
sense they're building worlds of their own on social media, and they're creating this
Absolutely.
almost like this ecosystem
A
where
worldview.
their ideas, it's
Yeah.
totally, it's world building. And that's kind of how I'm trying to reframe my perspective on social media and the newsletter that I put out, and the stuff that I'm doing, is that really I'm trying to create this world that I can then pass on to people and they can adopt. And hopefully it's going to be the kind of thing that's going to drastically improve their life. And I say that because it's drastically improved mine, if that
Mhm.
makes
Yeah.
sense. Like my life today looks so different from how it looked even 4 or 5 years ago. So
Yeah.
different. Like you wouldn't believe. And I think those are the kinds of things that, and this is deeper than social media. This is a lot of it's just the values and the ideas that are kind of driving me. And if I can in any way through social media project that onto people who are ready and willing, I mean, that to me is really where I say the money, and there is money in it, but also just
Yeah.
the actual impact is going to be made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and
I-
that's not just for audience building. That also goes for someone who's listening to this going, I want to work with more brands, or I want to work with my dream brand. That also goes for that. That also goes for people who are in the wedding space going, I want to work with more brides that I really want to work with. Like what you just said was the ability to build a brand where you are not just building, creative assets that look beautiful, but you're
Yeah.
building a worldview when someone can click on your brand, they can go, I'm clicking on Lucas's brand. I see a worldview. I see he loves the mountains. I see why he loves the mountains and the way he speaks about them and the way he writes about them, how it impacts him. I see his cold plunges. I see what that's doing to his body and his mind. Like you're
Yeah.
building an ecosystem that is selling a worldview, and brands, I believe more than ever too, are also trying to build those worldviews. And if they can find a creator that is matched with their worldview, that's a match made in heaven, and that's going to be a strong brand partnership, right? So
Yeah.
that is, I
Right.
think, an answer to why, as we spoke about earlier, the creative who's got a big audience, but maybe it was built without building a worldview. It was more built off like beautiful content, but some potentially way lacked a worldview. They might
Totally.
actually be finding it hard. So interesting. It's an
Yeah.
interesting conversation.
Even listening to you guys talking about this, I even think of it as like there's attraction and then there's engagement, right? And I feel like if you can blend those two, that's like when true growth on socials happen. You can do attention, which is like the stuff that's really grabby or really hooky or like all that kind of stuff, and you can get virality from that. But in order to actually build something, you have to have like the engagement side, which is activating your brain, which is activating passion, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
even the listener listening right now, trying to build an audience, it's like, which one are you stronger in and which one are you need to invest some more time in, right?
Yeah, it's
Like
good.
if you're
good.
all about engagement, you might not have the attraction side because you need to upgrade whatever it is to hook people in. But
Mm.
on both sides, I
Uh-huh.
think there's growth available for each and every one of us. to focus
Remember
on.
that consulting process I told you should build for brands and sell for a lot of money? That's it
Yeah,
right
totally.
there. How do
That's
you help a
it.
brand build attraction, but at the same time build a worldview image and an identity of having a worldview? There it is. Go
There it
sell that,
is.
Lucas, because that's really good.
Yeah,
That was
I'll have to
awesome.
work on it. But no, I love what you just said. I think I'm going to say something that I don't think creatives are used to hearing at all. And I think the truth is almost everything you do as a creative is actually rooted in writing. And I say that I say that as someone who loves a camera and who got into this world with a camera in my hand. But I genuinely think, I mean, you look at even some of the most beautiful things you could ever come across on social media, and often they're also very much driven by what's written in the caption or what's written in the text on screen. And
Mhm.
the text on screen is not just a mechanism to engage more touch points in the person's brain and keep them around for longer. It's also very much the kind of thing that people are craving and they're wanting to because
Yes.
it's a tool for understanding
Yeah.
and to. I mean, it sounds so cliche, but we are learning, right? Like we're always
Yep.
learning, and there's very shallow forms of entertainment where maybe the visual is okay, But I mean, if you want to do like if you want to grow on social media, if you want to improve your ability to work with brands, if you want to be able to sell yourself, if you want to be able to do, to be honest with you, almost anything really productive with your
Uh,
life, if you can learn how to write and communicate yourself, whether that's on social media or that's over email or it's even with your
uh,
text with your partner, like
uh-huh.
whatever it is, that is going to have such a massive trickle down effect into what you're
Yeah.
doing. Like I've
Yeah.
noticed the ideas that are being put out in the content that I'm putting out on Instagram, I would say, if I may say so myself, the quality of them has improved drastically after I started writing weekly newsletters. And it's
Uh,
Mhm.
because the practice of sitting down and writing every week, 800 to 1,000 words and pushing it out to people, the purpose isn't actually for the people all the time. It's
it's
also
for
just
you.
for me.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
totally for me. And like I've
Mm.
got there are some email subscribers and I love them because they're the ones who get to actually get a little window into my brain. I think a lot more so than those just on Instagram. But I
Yeah.
think that's like if you were to outline the perfect social media growth plan, I'd say this. I'd say write a newsletter, let's say every week or every month or whatever, and then turn that newsletter into a long form video, and then take the ideas that you're putting out in those long form videos or podcasting, can be anything, and then turn it into social media and turn it into short form reels, turn it into captions for photos, turn it into you post a photo and you have some text on screen, whatever,
Mm.
and like
Yeah.
make those kind of the sound bites. But then it's again going back to this worldview, building a world. Like then you're actually building a world. Because if you're just hopping on every trend and like
Yep.
posting the thing
Yeah.
that's getting views, you're
Yeah.
not actually building it. You are building a world, but it's not your world. It's just
Yes.
like the world of
Yes.
whatever's trending, and it
Yep.
disappears so quickly. And so
Mm.
again,
Yeah.
like I'm kind of talking to myself here, myself 6 months ago, but I think that's why I care so much about this right now is because I'm kind of in this process of
Mm.
almost like reinventing
It's
what that world
beautiful.
is for myself.
Yeah.
I love it. It's so fun.
That's so cool.
That's cool,
That's a
man.
great
And
flow
the other
too.
cool
I
thing
love
is
that
the money,
idea.
like the money comes for sure at one point, at some point, and it is certainly a goal, and it has to be there to be sustainable. But that being said, like if you're just building a world and you're building this brand for the sake of making money, well, I hate to break it to you, but it's not going to last very long.
Mm.
And you see that in every great founder, every great entrepreneur, every great businessman. Like they're not so obsessed with making money that they're forgetting why they're there in the first place.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I know that's true for you guys. Like
Yeah.
it's like your tagline. You're trying to build a world where more creatives succeed. And so I think like that it's so cliche, but that why and that world that you're trying to build is so much more important because like the money will come. It's a
Yep.
part of it, but
Yeah.
if it's like number one on your pecking order, like everything else is gonna fall apart very quickly.
Yeah. Have you read the book Infinite Game by Simon Sinek?
That's a great case. So I literally the second last newsletter I sent out was called On Infinite Games, and I talked a lot about alpinism as like one of the purest forms of the infinite game.
Mm.
Mhm.
But business is very much an outlet of that too. So I actually
Mm.
read the book. I listened to a 30-minute podcast of him
Oh,
talking
sick.
about it. But
Cool.
it came from this guy. I can't remember his name. I don't want to say it. I can't remember it. But Simon took it from this guy back in the 80s who kind of came up with this concept, and he turned it into more of a business thing. But
Yeah.
I love that concept, right? Because
We-
that's really what
So
we're all
good.
doing.
When we were like coming up with the idea of like Creative Rise exists to build a world where more creatives succeed at doing what they love, that came after we read Infinite Game.
Yeah.
We read that and we're like, we're
So
so
cool.
freaking
Yeah, we need.
Oh, I love
We were
inspired.
like, we
let's
need a
do
more
it.
infinite cause. That's
Yeah.
literally the conversation we had.
Yeah.
And then we were like, we are going to build this to build the cause. So, example, we were just up in Calgary 2 days ago. Actually, yesterday we just got home, and we were up there for 4 days building into Socality, which I know you're very familiar with. We've been around for a
What's
long
Scotty
time.
B?
And run by great friends, right? And a lot of people would probably look at that and go, but wait a second, Socality looks like it would be like a competitor of Creative Rise or something. And I'm going, no, they're pushing the same cause. They're
Yeah.
trying to build a world where more creatives succeed while doing what they love. Now, their method to push it looks a lot different than what we were doing, right? They focus a lot more on just building community and, teaching you
creative
creativity,
side.
creative stuff.
It's
We
sick.
focused entirely on how to help you actually make money, right? So, but it's all because of the cause. Like,
Yeah.
if I was an incredibly insecure version of myself, I might look at that and go, we're not going to get involved with that because you guys are competitors. Like, no. They're pushing the same cause. Therefore, if we believe in the cause, we got to partner up. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
really cool. I love
It's-
that.
It's just a mindset shift, right? Like I think, and I've encountered this on social media where I've had people that I know, get really angry at other people for like copying content styles or whatever. And one, it's like the stupidest blame game you could ever get involved in. But two, like
Yes.
on a much
Yes.
broader level, like there is so much truth to the fact that a rising tide lifts all boats, especially when
Yes.
you're like, I mean, and I think it must have been Hormozy that said it, but someone I think someone was like, "Oh, I can't get into this niche. Like this niche is too saturated." He's like, "It's like a $650 billion niche. Like you think you can't make a million in there? Like
Mhm.
it's just it's kind of
Yes.
that same world where it's like the creative industry is so incredibly massive. Like to think that the next guy is like sabotaging your business is just like, I mean, it's really just kind of arrogant at that point. It's like, you
100%.
Oh,
know,
Yes.
for
there's
sure.
so much we can all learn from each other, and we're gonna do so much better when we can.
And it's
Yes.
way more fun to
100%.
do it together. That's for
100%.
sure.
Okay, so let's wrap up with this. You obviously went through the mastermind. You've touched on it a couple times about how it was impactful for your business. It was not an easy decision for you, which it's not for anybody.
Mm-mm.
Everybody that ever comes through it, I remember when we were chatting about it, you and I had a conversation before you jumped in, and you were just trying to check your basis, right? Which is smart. Going, is this for me? Is this something that's actually going to be of value to me? Which is amazing. Like everyone should always think about that before making an investment into their business. And I remember telling you, oh man, everyone has these exact questions. So I'm glad you're asking them because it shows you actually care about where your business is going and, you know, the resources you have available to you. You obviously jump in. What happened? What was a thing or two that you found valuable in the mastermind? I know you already talked about access to other people.
Mhm.
Um, give me one or two things for someone who's listening going, you know, I've been kind of thinking about this thing, I've been hearing about it, or I'm not even super sure what it is, but I'm going to look it up after. Like from Lucas's perspective, why was that form of education non-traditional, as you called it earlier? Why was the form of education called the Creative Rise Mastermind, the 6-week mastermind, impactful for your business? And yeah, run with it from there.
Yeah, totally. Well, you know, I think one of the things that I knew going into Creative Rise was that in pretty much any area of life, like there's levels,
Mm.
and I was in the creative world. I was at like, oh boy, like let's say there's 10 levels to the game. I was at like maybe level 0.5. Like I didn't know much, and I think what I saw with you guys was that you were like this perfect step where I could go from a level 0.5 to whatever. I don't even know where I am now, but I learned a lot because I was around a lot of people that were in a very similar boat to you know the boat that I was in, which was, you know, we've got some income, we've maybe got something figured out. We're definitely not, you know, probably most wouldn't describe themselves as thriving. Like we're kind of just like making things work here. And so one, there's a lot of power in being around people that are in a similar boat.
Mm.
Yeah.
And two, I think there's a lot of power in being with, like when I sat down and learned from you and Christy, you know, you're a couple years older than me, not a crazy amount older than me. You were kind of the next logical step where I'm like, you know, they got 4 or 5 years on me. They've moved ahead. They're doing some incredible things. But Joey's not like 55 and having built like this, you know, $200 million like crazy creative industry. Like
Yes.
For sure.
there's I think understanding where you're at and understanding what the next level looks like is such a huge thing. And so for
Mm.
me,
Yeah.
Creative Rise was that perfect next step. And so if you're anywhere, like if you're a college student, if you're already a full-time creative and you just want to find ways to like surround yourself with people that are going to take you to that next level, definitely invest in it. Like totally worth it. And I think, yeah, so that community was really worth it. And I think it just opened up to me a whole world that I didn't really see. Like, I've obviously talked with you, Joey, about people that you know in the industry that are doing like way bigger things than what you're doing. And I think we all kind of realize like there's always that next big fish,
Mm.
which is, I mean, that's why the game is so fun, right?
Yes.
But I think like opening myself up to a world that is granted quite hard to understand unless you're in it. Creative Rise was that perfect jumping off point where I was like, okay, now I'm doing this for real. Like we're jumping in. I'm gonna take a dive into this. And then I came out of that 6-week mastermind and was like, okay, this is like a world I very much want to be involved in. And
Hmm.
there's very tangible steps I can take to move forward. And not only can I, so can the rest of these people that are all in here
Yeah.
with me that I didn't
Yeah.
really know. And to date, I still talk with some of them. Like, you know, I'll
Yeah,
still
of
hit some of
course.
them
That's
up.
awesome.
And it's kind of, you know, I mean, I know that's a bit of a that's a common theme across all your cohorts. People like to stay in touch. And so
Mm.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I think yeah, I mean, not to just like, you know, pump your tires left and right, but genuinely, like I think you guys do an awesome job of running it. Like I think
Thanks, man.
your ability
Appreciate
to
that.
kind of gauge where people are at and kind of meet them where they're at, but also provide like a really tangible and realistic, but still like a stretching goal is
Mm.
so cool. Like that for
Mm.
me was really neat. Because you'll have people come into your program making 100 grand. You'll have people come to your program making absolutely nothing. And
Yeah.
that's not an easy, like, I think back, I'm like, that is not an easy thing to balance. Like, I don't know how you do that. So
Yeah. It
It
takes
works
some work.
though. Like
Yeah.
something about it works. Like we have every round we've done, and yours included. There's people that are all over the map income wise and all over the map experience wise.
And that's why it
And
works,
it's why
because
the diversity of it is
the
why
diverse
it's special,
problems is
which
actually what
cool.
creates, like, it creates a curiosity in you to learn from people with other problems you don't have.
Yeah.
It creates a
Totally.
curiosity in other people to learn from problems you've had or have and how you're solving. Like, it's really cool. Okay,
Yeah.
so I love that, man. And I'm so glad you took that step. I'm glad you're continuing to take steps like that are continuing to build your business. I love where you've come. I
Yeah.
want all of our listeners to be able to learn from you and get on your list.
Yeah.
How can people actually get on your newsletter? Because the idea of your newsletter is really cool. I love what you just said about words. We would 100% agree with you. Like the art of mastering how to use words to convey a worldview, as we've been talking a lot about on this show today, is it's invaluable. So I would love for people to learn how to do that from studying you and how in your journey of doing that.
Yeah.
And I think you just provide awesome content, and I'd love to pump you because I love what you're doing.
Yeah,
So
so how can people find
even
you?
just the newsletter, how can people find
Yeah.
you? Where can people find you on social?
Yeah, totally. I try to make it as easy as possible. Basically everything is under my Instagram, which is at Exploroman, which is a hilarious name I made for myself when I was in grade 6, I think. It's actually a funny story. I wasn't allowed to have Instagram. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have a phone until I was in like grade 10 or 11. But I was really sneaky, and so I had a laptop, and so I made an Instagram account on a laptop. But I was like, I don't want my parents to find it.
Yes.
And so I was like, oh, like, how am I gonna? It was like grade 6, Lukas, and I'm like, oh, like what's my username gonna be? And it felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. I was like, this Instagram,
Yes.
this is huge, right? And I was like, well, I kind of like to. At the time, I think I was in Indonesia, and I was like, oh, I like to explore. Like I like that, and like my last name's Explorer works, and I was just like, I made it. And then I've had a number of times over the years, people are like, what the heck is that? And I'm like, it's kind of, that's what it is. Like, it was just me as a grade 6 kid being like, I love to explore, and my last name is Mann, and I guess that's it. And so it's kind of been a bit of a, like, it's kind of grown itself into like a bit more of like a brand, but
Yes.
it's kind of where it started. So everything's
I
under
love that.
Explorer Man. It's www.explorerman.com, or at Explorerman on basically anything. And then the newsletter, I mean, I plug it in posts all the time, but it should be right in the link in the bio, or it's
Cool.
very obvious on my website too.
I love it,
yeah,
man.
I don't spam. I just send out stuff that I'm finding interesting.
Love it.
And yeah, I have
That
a ton
should
of
that should be a new theme, or not a theme, a new maybe a theme of a newsletter. It could be interesting things in industries.
Industry.
Industry. I love it, dude. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for giving us an hour of your time. Thanks for giving the listeners of the show an hour of your time. This has been so cool. Love so much of what you said, and this is just really cool. I mean, you were put together, well spoken, full of value when we first met, prior to you going through the mastermind.
Absolutely.
But I love seeing what the mastermind exposed you to, how you've used it, and then I love seeing where you've run from there. Like I just genuinely enjoy watching you build, and having you on this podcast has been really fun to even just talk about that. So love what you're doing, man. Huge congrats to all the successes over the last year. Any closing words
Yeah.
from either
Oh,
of you
final
guys?
question.
Oh yeah.
It's our signature guest question. Why is it worth it for somebody to break the creative struggle? Why is it worth it for somebody
To go for it.
drop out, to go for it, to pursue what they're passionate about and do what they love? Why is it worth it, in your opinion?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think the tried and true answer is life's short, and you never know what's possible unless you try. And the other thing is, usually the worst case isn't that bad. Like, I remember actually that was a massive part of my like mental computation to decide whether to drop out. I was like, what's the actual worst thing that could happen?
Yeah.
The worst thing that could happen is I fall flat on my face, I don't have any money, and I go home and I work for a couple months and make a bit more money and then try again. I was
Yeah.
like, well, that's not actually that bad. So
Yes.
I really actually being honest with yourself about like what failure actually is, and generally most of us listening to this podcast are privileged enough that failure doesn't look like you're out on the street begging for food, and if it does, then maybe it's not the right choice to make. But I do think most of us have a bit more leeway than we actually think we do to actually
Yeah.
take a bit of a risk.
Mm.
And if you're young, like there is no better time to take a risk than now, right? Like when
Yep.
I dropped out of school, I was I'll say I was 20 years old and I had no car and I was just found a place to live. But so I didn't have much. But the other thing was I didn't have much in the way of like life expenses. My life was pretty
Yep.
cheap. And so it actually enabled the lifestyle of being able to gradually grow something
Yeah.
and put more money back into it. And so yeah, don't
That's
underestimate
amazing.
yourself. That was the other thing I would say is don't underestimate yourself if you're young, right? Like I turned 21 a few months ago. I'm not that old. So there's a lot of really cool people doing really incredible things at a young age. And yeah, definitely don't let that stop you because there's so much out there waiting to be had for people that are willing to go get it.
That's sweet. That's
I love
a
it,
good
man.
word.
Lucas Mann, aka Exploro Man, thanks for being on the show, brother. This has been
Appreciate it.
great. Yeah, super appreciate you being on today and
Yeah.
for giving everybody
Thanks for being here.
yeah, giving everybody an insight into your world, worldview. So everybody who's listening, make sure you go follow Lucas. We'll drop everything into the description of the podcast, his newsletter, socials, all that good stuff. So you can go find him there. Dude, thanks for being on.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys.
Well, what a great convo with Lucas. I told you the longer you listen, the better it was going to get. That was so good, especially near the end, like so philosophical,
I know, that's fun.
strategyful. It's definitely not a word. I mean, like tactical, strategic. That's what I was going for.
Strategical.
Yeah, strategical. That was so good. So huge shout out to Lucas. Make sure you go connect with him online. All his links are in the description of this podcast. Great conversation.
Yeah, really,
So
really
cool
fun.
to see how he's grown since doing the mastermind. Like round 9 was, like I think under 12 months ago.
I
So
know,
cool.
Which is so crazy what can happen in a year if you take action. And I'm not saying the mastermind, maybe it's not your action, or if it is, we'd be so excited to have you, but taking some form of action forward in your business. And we just also encourage you, make sure it's something where it has accountability attached to it. Make sure it's something that has community attached to it. Because like Lucas said, you can kind of go and like find creative stuff on the internet, Google, whatever it is. But honestly, when it's left to our own devices by ourselves, usually we don't end up where we want to be.
It's going to take you a lot longer,
take you a
and
lot
you're probably not
longer.
going to implement it.
It's
right?
just not probably going to go the way you want it to. So find something that has community. And if you're like, you know what, I can't really find a lot of stuff that has, the coaching, the content, the community, and the accountability. Well, that's why we created literally the Creative Rise Mastermind. We wanted to create something that would give people the best shot at building a 6-figure creative business, the framework for building a 6-figure business and the foundation for doing so. And we just really believe after both being in the industry for a decade, for being in multiple different industries, building those 6-figure businesses, what do you need? You need the knowledge and the strategy to get there. You need a community of people who are cheering alongside you, but not only just cheering, but also challenging you in order to get there. And you need that accountability to actually do what you said you were going to do. And that is all wrapped up in this 6-week mastermind. And if you are like, yo, that sounds sick, actually.
I was going to say, can I say how it works?
Yeah, you can say how it works.
And then you can carry on. We should probably explain how it works. For everybody who's listening who you're not fully sure how it works, basically, as Christy said, there's a massive communal aspect, accountability aspect, and a coaching aspect. The coaching aspect is covering 6 major pillars that helps you build a 6-figure foundation for your business. So the 6 pillars are 1, a clear band. 2, scalable offers. 3, networking that actually makes you money. Marketing and selling like a pro is number 4. Number 5 is scaling your systems, time, and money. And number 6 is actually how you can be productive and hustle in a healthy way. So we drop every single Monday morning modules for each week. Each week is 1 pillar. The modules on that pillar, it's over 15 hours worth of content over the 6 weeks, and we leak it to you pillar at a time so you can actually implement it. Then on Thursdays, we gather as an entire mastermind community and get on a live call. Typically, these are like 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
So fun. And we just go through so many different things. Our model for those live calls is really fun. There's a ton of communal aspects. So we break you guys into breakout groups to do different things. But really, those live calls are for you to take what you are learning in the modules, implement them. And if there's anything stopping you from implementing them at a super high level, that is the time for you to get answers, right?
Yeah.
Answers to questions, all that stuff. Tons of encouragement, tons of connection, full access to Christy and I. We get our hands on your business in those calls. And then there's just a constant chain of communication the whole time too.
Yeah.
I mean, our Instagram group chat with everybody goes off the whole time. Great place for you to ask questions, get feedback, be encouraged, encourage people. It's phenomenal. So that's kind of the mastermind in a gist over 6 weeks. And yeah, carry on. But that is kind of how it works. That is actually how it works. And that's what that is the system that creates so many results for people like Lucas.
Yeah.
Because it's designed that way.
Yeah. So if you're someone who's like, man, I need results. This is not a side hobby. This is something that I'm doing full time, that I'm excited about doing full time, or I want to get there to do it full time. I want to get that foundation for a 6-figure business. This is one of the best places to do it on the internet. And it's coming so soon. Applications launch to the public February 18th. However, if you're listening to this right now, when this releases, before that date, you can join the wait list. And the wait list is totally free. You don't have to commit. It's just a simple wait list. However, that simple wait list is going to get you early access. So you're going to get that access to the application before everyone else does. And last round, 31 out of the 37 spots were taken by the wait list within the first
Massive number.
2 days. So we want you to be on the wait list if you're serious about getting in. You get early access. You'll also get early pricing. So you get early pricing. You'll get like basically a discount off of the mastermind price, which is unbelievable. And then lastly, even just to sweeten the deal a little bit more, you get access to tons of early bonus content, courses, all this stuff that honestly no one else will get access to if you're not on the wait list. Only for the wait list. So there's no harm in getting on the wait list.
CreativeRise.com.
Everything to gain, nothing to lose. So CreativeRise.com is where you can jump on the wait list. Again, totally free. Jump on the wait list, and also make sure you join us on February 18th February 15th
4:30 Pacific Standard Time
for the 6-figure sales workshop. We are so excited to see you there. Jump on that. Again, that is also free. We're just giving out a bunch of free stuff right now.
Yeah.
But that is free.
It's going to be so good.
Join us for that, and it's going to be a blast.
We can't wait to see you there, guys. So we'll catch you next week. Thanks for being here. And again, go follow Lucas online. Give him a shout out. Let him know how he gave you some value in this episode. And we'll see you later.